I'm going to call the Wednesday, February 25th, Camden Rockport Schools regular school board meeting to order. Just a note, if you are coming up to speak about an item, like administrators, we have to have you come to the podium because that's the only way Colin will pick you up, and board members, if you can lean in when you ask questions or talk so that Colin can pick you up on our mics. Maria, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
There are no adjustments to the agenda tonight.
Public comment on items not on the agenda. Seeing none. Minutes. Can I get a motion to approve our slate of minutes? They are January 21st, regular board meeting, January 29th, special joint board meeting, and February 11th, special joint board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Perfect. Recognition. Heather Butler.
Yeah, can you come down, Heather?
Heather, is this your second meeting in a row you've been here with us? Sorry about that. If only we could have combined. She does live here.
So you'll remember Heather from last meeting where she presented on a place-based interdisciplinary project-based learning experience for CRMS fifth graders that brings students into deep contact with their community and in which they actually impact our community. Last night she was running her 11th annual poetry cafe for fifth grade students and families, an impressive exercise. You may have also seen her and her students at Page Gallery this fall in a really impressive poetry and art collaboration between artists and students, and the list goes on and on. This is the second year she's been nominated to be the Maine State Teacher of the Year, and has too many other things going on to actually follow through on the application.
It's a lot of work. It's expensive.
And tonight we're recognizing her because the Maine Council for English Language Arts, an affiliate of the National Council of Teachers of English, wishes to recognize and celebrate ELA teachers who have demonstrated excellence in teaching and inspired a spirit of inquiry and a love of learning in their students, and they've selected Heather Butler as this year's State Teacher of Excellence. She is a rock star and Teacher of Excellence. You should say something.
You should say something.
A poem? No. I make all my students memorize poems. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. No, it's a huge honor to get this award. I mean, I don't need the recognition, but it's nice to hear that they recognize me. I'm going to be presenting at the conference in March, so I have to put together a presentation, which I'm looking forward to. But yeah, it's an honor. I think like working with the students and bringing them to a different place. Last night, the Poetry Cafe, one of my favorite events. Was a place where the students get to kind of really shine and share their own poems that they've written. And the responses today from parents are always really positive because they really get to see their kids in a different light of sharing something that's really, really personal. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I think we all know how excellent our teachers are, but it's really nice to see them recognized in a wider way. So. Item number 6, nominations.
So we have 2 nominations there for spring coaches at the middle school. Erin Henderson and Zach Kramer. Both of those coaches are teachers in our 2 districts.
Can I get a motion to approve those nominations?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, approval of the 2026-27 school calendar for both CRES and CRMS.
So you'll see the calendars on pages 12 and 13 of the packet. The calendars are essentially identical to this year's calendars, and there are no major changes from this year. They're aligned to each other very closely, just one conference day is different throughout the year, but I think the rest of the days are all the same, except for maybe the orientation for Little Tykes at the elementary school. But they're very similar calendars. They're also aligned to the high school. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer on the calendar, but it should be pretty familiar to most of you at this point.
Can I get a motion to approve the calendar if there are no questions?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? All right, Maria, you're up for the fiscal year 27 requested budget presentation.
All right, so the board will, some of you might have to flip your chairs around so that you can see the screen behind us. So I'm going to walk you through the requested budget for next year. And this is the, the first version that you'll see. You'll see any updates at the March meeting, and then the board will vote at the April meeting on the budget that ultimately will go to taxpayers. So right now, the status of this budget is that the expense increase is 2.57%, and the taxpayer increase is at 1.91%. So I'm just going to go through a little context before I start presenting you the details of the budget, and those details are, me walking you through each of the cost centers. That could be one of Heather's students' poems, for all I know.
That's the 7th grade.
Not quite.
Learning to see.
All right, well, she prepped them for that
She was
project.
part of that process, I'm sure.
So,
Sorry, before we start, Maria, would it be okay, can we move the curtain back just a little? I don't know if there's someone here. Okay, thank you.
this budget adjusts to our varied and changing needs. It includes some reductions and some additions. All of the changes are based on enrollment, needs, and capacity. It's a balanced approach. The budget achieves fiscal responsibility while maintaining strong programming and district sustainability. Basically, the way we make decisions about resource allocation are, it's like a little bit like a math problem. I was a math teacher, so, maybe this makes more sense to me than it does to others, but essentially, the decisions about resource allocation equal enrollment plus capacity plus level of student need. Overall, our goal is to maintain excellence in education and reasonable expectations for staff while meeting student needs. So just to be clear, we don't make staffing reductions or additions as trade-offs. Each decision we're making about staffing is made individually based on enrollment capacity and need. So for this budget, we literally went through every single position that exists in MSAD 28 and evaluated each position based on enrollment, capacity, and need. Some positions depend more on enrollment than others. Other positions might depend on structure versus enrollment, might depend on student need versus enrollment. So it really depends on the position itself. But we're not we're not making a trade-off. If we eliminate a grade 3 teacher, that means we don't have to eliminate something else. We literally are looking at each thing individually based on what we need. So just to give you a picture of our 10-year enrollment trend, and so these are October enrollments, and this is what we have to submit to the state each year in October. And so we just use that number as kind of a consistent time. So I've added the top row for pre-K, which we started in 2021. And if you just look at that top row, you can see that our projected enrollment for 2026, we're using 36. We actually think that's probably a little bit high, but we just don't know yet. So that's just been our kind of our working number this year. In the column to the right shows the net change in enrollment in each of these categories over the past 10 years. So we've had an increase of 36. If we end up with 36 pre-K students, we'll have an increase of 36 pre-K students over the past 10 years. K through 4 enrollment, we're projecting it to be 286 next year. That's a 90 student decline or decrease since 2016. 5 through 8, we're expecting 333 students next year, and that's a 26 student decrease in enrollment. So overall, including pre-K, is an 80 student decline in enrollment over the past 10 years. From that data table, it's clear that pre-K numbers will increase because we didn't have any pre-K students, 5 to 10 years ago. And it's pretty clear that our K-4 numbers have significantly decreased. In fact, we've had a 24% decrease in enrollment at the K-4 level in the past 10 years. Naturally, fewer staff are needed when there's a significant decline in enrollment. So I'm actually, before I get into the details, I'm going to actually just be right up front about what we're doing with staffing. So I'm going to kind of tell you the staffing story. I'm going to start with the reductions that are included in this proposed budget, and then I'm going to move on to the additions that we're making. So the reductions that we're making, this says what the reductions are and why, and just overall we're reducing in this budget the equivalent of 7.7 full-time equivalent staff members. We're eliminating a grade 3 classroom teacher. We have 52 students in grade 2 this year, which means that grade 3 will only need 3 teachers next year. Class sizes will be 17 to 18 students next year in grade 3 with 3 teachers, which is well below our policy targets. 4 teachers, if we kept 4 teachers, would mean we'd have class sizes of 13. We have reduced K-4 Spanish to half-time. The enrollment decline of 24% in the past 10 years means we have some adjusting to do with our special staffing in addition to our classroom teacher staffing. We are able to provide the same level of programming to grades 1 through 4 in Spanish with a half-time Spanish teacher. We don't plan to provide Spanish to pre-K or K next year. We're also eliminating 1 resource room teacher at the middle school. Those resource room teachers will have caseloads of 15 students instead of 11 students. The state maximum for caseloads in special ed is 28 students. So 15 is almost half of what the state maximum is. We're eliminating 1 of 2 multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, RTI, it's had a lot of names, it's intervention. So we're eliminating 1 of those 2 coordinators at the K-8 level. We currently have 2 people. We're cutting 1, so we'll have 1 left over that will serve K through 8. Some services may look different, but interventions for students will remain robust. We're planning to reduce elementary GT from 0.8 FTE to 0.6 FTE. We're able to meet current and projected GT needs with that level of staffing. We're also planning to eliminate 4 ed tech positions due to a decline in numbers and reduced needs. Those 4 ed tech positions are 1 resource room ed tech, that's special ed at the elementary school, 1 special ed resource room ed tech at the middle school, 1 one-to-one ed tech who's serving a student who's in 504, and that student no longer needs a one-on-one ed tech, so we're eliminating that position. And then we're also eliminating the CRMS behavior ed tech that was hired maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So those are the reductions that we're planning to make. I want to just talk about universal pre-K for a minute so that you understand how universal pre-K is working, particularly with special education. So the budget that I'm presenting does not include pre-K, special ed expenses, or revenues, because the state mandates that we charge those expenses to a totally separate fund. So it's special ed pre-K isn't included in this budget because we're mandated to have a separate fund for it. That fund is 100% paid by the state, so it doesn't impact our budget whatsoever. We have staffing additions in that budget, and so there'll be more people at the elementary school because of universal pre-K, although those positions aren't in this budget, again, because the state says we have a separate fund for it and the state's paying for everything. But I did want to just go over those additions so that you're aware. So right now, this is just special education. So Chris Walker-Spencer, if you can make a note that I would like to add staffing additions for special ed, universal pre-K. It's just special ed I'm talking about here. So we are adding 4 ed techs to pre-K. A special ed tech. There'll be 1 for each of our classrooms, and there'll be 1 in the life skills program and 1 in the behavior program, because we'll have pre-K kids in our self-contained programs, and we'll have an ed tech assigned to each of those programs, a special ed tech. So those are the 4 additions for ed techs. We're adding a half pre-K special ed teacher that will be there on their caseload will be the pre-K special ed students, of which we may have between 6 and 10 pre-K students. In the special ed budget for pre-K, there'll be a quarter of a pre-K coordinator, and that's the special ed share of the pre-K coordinator. We're going to have a half-time pre-K coordinator. Half of it is in the regular budget, which you'll see, and half of it is special ed. And it's only a half, so each of those are a quarter share. We also have half a pre-K speech and language teacher and half a pre-K OT, PT, and psych. It adds up to a half FTE. Those services will probably be consulting services, but it's equivalent to a half-time position. So those are the special ed additions because of moving to universal pre-K and taking over services for 4-year-olds with special ed services, taking that over from the state, which is a mandate that schools take over 4-year-old special ed services from CDS. Other additions that are in our budget are the equivalent of 3.75 FTEs. In addition to those pre-K ones, I'm kind of not counting here because it's not touching this budget, but that was some additions, but this is what's touching this budget. We have a pre-K regular ed teacher. That will be the teacher in the additional classroom. We have a regular ed tech in that additional classroom. Right now we have 1 pre-K class. It has a teacher and a regular ed tech. There are no special ed students in that class right now. Next year, we're going to add a special ed tech to that class, because there will be special ed kids in both classes. And in the second class, we'll need a teacher, a regular ed tech, and a special ed tech. That other share of the halftime coordinator is in this budget under the regular ed budget, so it's a quarter share of that pre-K coordinator. We're also adding a halftime accounts receivable position that is shared in the central office, that's shared with the CSD. So actually in this budget, we're only going to have to pay for a quarter of that position. It's a half-time position that's being added. And the same here, we're adding a full-time position, but it's shared between the 2 districts. And that number 5 is an administrative assistant who will support facilities, transportation, assistant superintendent, and business manager. In addition to what we're adding for staff, we're reallocating 2 staff positions. We're reallocating the elementary school behavior specialist to become an elementary school BCBA position. Jess, BCBA, will you translate? Board Certified Behavior Analyst. That position is going to be split into 3 different cost centers because they'll be working in 3 different areas. 0.4% of their 40% of their time will be in pre-K, 20% will be special ed, and 40% will just be regular ed behavior support. We're also reallocating a kindergarten special ed teacher. This year that was an extra new position that was just kind of in a holding pattern, and we allocated it this year to kindergarten, and we are taking that position and allocating it to pre-K life skills and K through 4 life skills. So We anticipate having pre-K students in the life skills program, and this teacher will help the current life skills teacher with the pre-K student or students who are added. In addition, they'll go to K-4 life skills to add capacity there. Why are we having these additions? Well, all of the pre-K additions are because the state has mandated that schools take over special ed services for 4-year-olds. Access, cost, and quality of service led us to conclude that offering universal pre-K was our best approach to do that. And to do that, we need to meet the staffing needs in order to have universal pre-K. So that's why those pre-K additions exist in both special ed and regular ed. The central office positions, which was equivalent to 1.5 positions, and that's shared between the two districts, so it's 0.75 for each district. The central office has been chronically understaffed, and staff there are working well beyond capacity. That workload is unsustainable and unrealistic and has resulted in frequent turnover, and we're trying to address that by increasing capacity there. So now I'm actually going to go into the budget details, which is the more traditional part of my budget presentation.
Excuse me, Maria.
Yep.
Marie, if we have questions about is it easier to just address them on the fly or wait till the end?
I'm personally happy to do either. I don't know if you have a preference.
It was just a clarification point about the last page, the reallocation, or 2 pages right here. Under B, are the 2 positions identified there as they're reallocated? Is it the same general qualifications for the individuals in those positions and the same pay rate?
The BCBA has to actually be board certified. And I do think it's relatively similar pay. I actually can't quite remember that. Do you, Jess, remember that? No difference? Okay, so we budgeted the same, and definitely in number 2, we budgeted the same and the same qualifications.
Thank you.
Ryan, while we're going back,
Yep.
on the halftime special education pre-K teacher, do we think that it will be difficult to find somebody who is teaching halftime?
That's a really good question. That is a full-time hire. There'll be a halftime pre-K special ed teacher, halftime pre-K coordinator.
Okay.
So it'll be 1 full-time position.
My question was that, and now I think I have a related addition. So the pre-K coordinator aspect of the job, a quarter of it is general education reflected in this budget. A quarter of it is reimbursed by the state because it's
Yep.
special education. And then what is the role of, what is pre-K coordinator? Like, what is that? What would they be doing?
I see Jess getting ready to stand up because she's got to come up to the microphone and
Come on
answer
up,
that
Jess.
question. She anticipates so well.
A pre-K coordinator is a common addition when districts take on 4-year-olds, and really their responsibility is to coordinate programming and services at a level much like an IEP coordinator in terms of making contact with families, coordinating child find activities, which are much more extensive at this level because we're really reaching out into the community, and typically we conduct child find at school, right? So that's a huge part of that role. They also, run meetings, coordinate services, work on paperwork with staff, those sorts of logistical challenges. But I would say the child find role is one of the primary responsibilities, and then doing that outreach to communities and families that really exist to support, bringing the 4-year-olds kind of under our umbrella as well.
In the future, would that coordination role be used to address 3-year-olds or coordinate some of the services that
Certainly,
will-
and it might need to be expanded as a result of that, depending on the service model that we elect. The general ed side of the role also would work with if we were to have, like a partner, it would work with the partner in terms of coordinating curriculum and services also there. But really the outreach piece for the 3-year-olds with families and coordinating services, perhaps in homes or childcare settings, would be a part of that 3-year-old role. So depending on volume of work, I could foresee an expansion, but for 4-year-olds, we anticipate this would be appropriate to meet the need.
And then final question on that. So the administrative or coordinating aspects for special education students in K through 8, that's handled obviously through your office, through an IEP coordinator, and they wouldn't be able to take on this additional responsibility for 4-year-olds?
So at the K-8 level, we don't have an IEP coordinator currently, so I do have an assistant director and myself, and we cover the K-12 responsibilities. We don't run extensive child find kind of services at our level. That happens at the school building, but we don't feel that we necessarily have the capacity to take this on in addition to our responsibilities across the K-12 continuum and within the private schools. I will say, I've talked with a lot of people. I've done a lot of research. I've crunched a lot of numbers. And so the model of staffing that you see is based on all of those things that have come together. And so we anticipate that this will be a learning year. The folks at the state we spoke with indicated that perhaps we even underestimated the resources that we would need, but they said, go ahead and try it with what you think at this point, and we're definitely going to be assessing capacity to see, what is appropriate, what isn't, as we grow the model. So this is our starting point, and it is based on not just a guess, but an attempt to really capture the responsibilities that we're taking on and ensure sustainability for staff and excellent services for kids. Thank you.
Ready to move on? So this is a look at our 10-year percent increases to the budget. And you can see for next year what this budget represents is, the top row is the expense change. And this budget is at 2.57% increase. And the impact to taxpayers is at a 1.91% increase. And then off to the right is the 10-year average, which is, between 5 and 5.5% has been our 10-year average. In a couple more years, that average will go down significantly, because you can see in FY19, because of the middle school project, we had some hefty increases there. And then the following year was the MET building renovation. So those 2 years were kind of abnormal years that are still in our data. So the first and largest cost center is regular instruction. And overall, this line is seeing a 3.32% increase. So we have a 2.5 FTE full-time equivalent pre-K increase, which I've already gone over all the staffing things. A 2.7 FTE teaching reduction, 2 FTE ed tech reduction. This is in regular instruction again, I'm not in special ed. Our health insurance increase, we've budgeted at 11%. I know some districts are budgeting close to 20%. It's very difficult for us to know what this is going to be. We won't get the numbers until the end of March probably, or early April, so we get them very late, because the SAD approves its budget, the second week of April. There may be time to adjust this. In the CSD, our meeting's April 1st. It's highly unlikely we're going to be able to adjust health insurance according to what we finally learn. Our health insurance is going up, but hopefully it won't be a whole lot different from what we've budgeted, certainly not a whole lot higher. And in this budget is a teacher salary of an increase of 3%, plus the step increase per the contract that we have. And next year will be the final year of the teacher's contract. Special education is a very modest increase. It's 0.51%. Again, this does not include pre-K for special ed. It does include an elimination of one CRMS special ed teacher position and 2 ed tech positions in the resource rooms, 1 at each school, again, which I already went over. The other instruction line, which includes athletics and co-curricular activities, is increasing by 8.09%. We are bringing the full Dory summer program back into the budget. That accounts for some of that increase. And our athletic officials' fees have increased more than normal as well.
That's it, Maria.
Yep.
2 sentences. The summer Dory program is?
It's the program for kindergartners who might need a little boost before they enter kindergarten.
Thank you.
Yep. Student and staff support includes technology, library, counseling, health, curriculum, IT. This is actually decreasing by 2.04%, and in this line is one of the ed tech positions that's being cut. System administration has a 7.26% increase, and that's mostly due to the central office staffing additions that I already talked about, half of which is covered in this budget for the administrative assistant position. The CSD is covering the other half, and the accounts receivable position, which in this budget is about a quarter of that position, because it's only a half-time add. School administration is coming in at a 4.43% increase. It's not a whole lot to add there, nothing of note, just normal increases based on salary and health insurance. Transportation has quite a large increase, 27.15%. In this budget are 2 new buses and a new van, the lease amount for those 2 buses and a van, and that is to replace decommissioned vehicles. We're also budgeting for software costs in transportation that were left out of the FY26 budget. It's actually not anything new, but it wasn't in last year's budget, so it shows as an increase here. We have about $26,000 increase in our fuel estimates. We have about a $28,000 increase in homeless transportation, a $20,000 increase in the supply line because of more expensive supplies, and a $27,000 increase in admin services. And a lot of that is due to half of the central office position that's being created, the administrative assistant. Half of it is charged to these lines because half of it is transportation and facilities.
Just a quick question about the homeless transportation. Why the increase? I feel like and now I may be thinking of the CSD, but I think I remember hearing we weren't using that much this year for the McKinney-Vento transportation. Maybe I made that up.
Chris, do you remember? Can you come to the microphone? Chris, can you come to the microphone?
Oh.
Absolutely. Most of our van driver time is spent on homeless transportation as opposed to special ed out-of-district transportation.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of. Okay, thank you.
Our facilities line is increasing 4.22%. We are replacing some doors at the elementary school. Half of the cost is in this line, half of it is in the capital reserve line. There are some additions in pre-K in this budget in facilities. We will need another storage shed for outdoor classroom, some additional fencing, and replacing some flooring in the classroom that will be used for the second classroom. All told, that's about $52,500 addition for the pre-K. Our debts and other commitments.
Sorry, Maria, just one question on that one. Katie, I don't know, do you recall if there's still unused donated funding from the CRSA that could be allocated for that, or we're holding that for something else? I just remember hearing about a possible use for a shed.
$10,000,
Okay.
but that was really specific for the playground.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
which we haven't finished doing.
Okay.
Those pieces.
Okay, thanks. Debt service, not surprisingly, is decreasing. We should see a decrease every year for the next 20 years in this line until we have no debt service to pay off. In this line is the middle school project, the elementary school project, the Rose Hall project, and the recent elementary school HVAC overhaul. So we're carrying obviously quite a bit of debt, $3.2 million, but that amount we pay in interest goes down every year. But we'll be carrying this and it will be steadily going down each year. Our board contingency line this year was $150,000. We're reducing that by $10,000. It will be $140,000 next year. And this is a summary of our expense budget with each article that will be voted on at the May meeting, with the change from last year and the percentage, and then the overall total. So this budget represents a $551,509 increase in expenses over last year, or 2.57%. The other side of the budget is the revenue side. This slide shows our non-assessment revenues. We have a 7.85% increase in non-assessment revenues. Because of this relatively large increase, that's why our taxpayer impact is only 1.91%, because the increase in revenues offsets some of that increase in expenses. The biggest area is the second line, which is special ed tuition that other school districts are paying to us. We're getting an extra $177,500 from other districts because we have an additional couple of students with pretty high needs coming to our school district from a different school district, and they pay 100% of the cost. We carry that expense in our expense line. We hire ed techs to be one-on-one with these students, and we carry that in our expense line, but then it's offset in this revenue line. Our transportation revenue is going up as well, 24% increase there, and that's because our transportation costs are going up, but it means that we're also getting more revenue from the CSD because all the costs are going up, and they pay the SAD for transportation for Camden and Rockport students. And so we're getting more revenue because the costs are going up for both districts. So some of our costs, which we carry the costs and then they pay us, that is being offset somewhat by the extra they're paying us. We've got a slightly less estimate for interest on investments just because interest rates are not as good as they were last year. We have a decrease in our rental income because we are no longer receiving rent from the Montessori school. And some really good news, I think, is our carry forward, which was $75,000 for this current year's budget, and we are budgeting zero revenue from our fund balance to offset our budget. So that's a $75,000 decrease. That's good news for us because the less we depend on our fund balance to meet our budget, the more we have in our fund balance. And so historically, we've always carried some money here. We typically haven't needed it because we usually come in and we haven't spent every dime that we could have spent. But it's nice to actually not have to rely on that. So this is the first year in a very long time that we haven't needed any money here. For those of you who are on the CSD board, we're carrying $325,000 in the CSD as a revenue source in this line. Over time, it would be great for the CSD to also get down to where the SAD is now, at zero in that line. Our SAD has increased for the SAD by $52,000, so that helps a little bit as well. So our total of our non-assessment revenues is we get about $2.5 million from sources other than taxpayers to help offset some of that $22 million expense. Yeah.
Maria, the tuition for special ed students who are coming into the district, talking about, needing to staff up to meet the needs of those students, but I'm recalling reductions in special ed staffing, so I'm assuming those are just separate things, and
They are
I guess
sep-
I'm just trying to play that out.
Yeah, they're separate things. I mean,
Okay.
we have, very specific one-on-ones for this student who's a student from a different district. Like, we're not cutting that staffing.
No.
That somebody else is paying for that person to provide that service. But we carry that in the expense line. That has nothing to do with the other cuts we've made.
But we didn't need to hire to meet the needs of,
Oh, we very well may have had to hire, but those students are actually here right now.
they're not incoming.
They came mid-year.
Got it.
Yep.
Maria, on the transportation piece, we had, in the finance committee meeting, heard that while we're spending a lot to purchase the buses, we're also getting a lot reimbursed. Where does that money fit into our revenue piece? Or is that just?
So it's a really good question. When I heard Maggie say that, my thought was, we have not talked about that.
Okay.
So it's the first I had heard that. I also heard that we don't know how much we're getting.
Right.
So I don't know, Chris and I haven't had a chance to talk about that. So that's the first time we'd heard that tonight at that meeting. Yep.
Be a good surprise.
Yep, yep. So if we look at the overall revenue picture, the last slide I just showed you is the top line here. The non-assessment revenues from the prior page was about $2.5 million. So the rest of the budget needs to come from taxpayers. The rest of the budget is almost $19.5 million comes from taxpayers to add up to our expense budget. Part of that money is what is the required amount, the minimum amount we're required to raise from the state of Maine. $8.9 million. The way the town split that cost, this is, again, like written in law, is pupil count. So however many students we have, Camden and Rockport, determines how much money we have to raise, each town. In addition, we have debt service that we have to pay, and we spend more money than the minimum we're required to by the state. You can see that our additional local amount is almost creeping up to be equivalent to what the required minimum is. I didn't look at this, and it probably would be an interesting data point for us. I recall years ago, since in my tenure, that was maybe 50% of what was the required local, and then we'd raise about half as much again. And we're creeping up to almost doubling the minimum amount, which is just an interesting data point. But both the debt and the other additional local are based on valuation as opposed to pupil count for the two towns. That's how the splits are made. So if we take this all together, our expenses and our revenues, and we look at the increase to taxpayers, we don't have to count the non-assessment revenues. It comes out to 1.91% that we need to, is the extra money over this year's budget that we need to get from taxpayers, equivalent to $364,000 more than last year. And Camden's increase, when it all fleshes out, is $148,568, or an increase of 1.35%. Thank you. Rockport's increase is $215,817, or 2.66%.
And Maria, could you explain for anyone else who might be wondering why Rockport's increase is slightly larger than Camden's?
Those are the next slides.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
So the required local amount, which on this slide, the required local amount is that $8.9 million. That is based on mostly pupil count, and it can be based on valuation. But in our cases, it's not based on valuation, because our pupil count and our valuation is so high that valuation, we don't get any subsidy, so it really is based on pupil count for us. And we literally take that rate off a report that the state sends to us called the ED 279. Section F tells us exactly how much each town has to pay. Camden's pupil count went, this is an average pupil count over like 3 years. Camden's, and it's what the state bases this on. Camden's went from 365 to 355, so a decrease of 10 students. And Rockport's went from 315.5 to 304, so a decrease of 11.5. So Rockport had a bigger decrease, which means Rockport would have to raise relatively less money because they don't have as many students. They take the number of students and multiply it by a certain dollar amount and tell you how much you have to raise as a minimum. But the additional local is the debt and the expenses above. And if you go back to this slide, that's over $10 million. It's a larger amount of money that we're paying in additional local. So the required amount is smaller than our additional amount. And Rockport had a valuation that increased to a larger degree than Camden's increased. And it resulted in a small, but these small shifts, even 2 student shifts, are significant shifts in the share. But this resulted in a 0.23% shift from Camden to Rockport based on the valuation. And, you know, Camden and Rockport, part of the Camden Rockport valuation is allocated to SAD 28, and part of it is allocated to the 5-town CSD, because Camden and Rockport are in 2 different districts, so they split our valuation and how it impacts. But, so that's how those things are determined. And at the end of the day, because last year, Rockport received subsidy. So for the first time ever, Rockport's valuation didn't come out in the formula enough to pay what they were supposed to pay. And the state made up the difference, and that's how you get a subsidy. Camden's never received a subsidy. So last year, for the first time, the SAD district wasn't actually a minimum receiver. One town was, but one town got a subsidy. This year, we're back to how it used to be. Neither town got a subsidy. We get subsidized for our special ed costs, but we don't get subsidized for our regular ed costs. So we're back being a minimum receiver. And a minimum receiver means that whatever amount they tell you have to raise based on your pupil count, the valuation says you can actually afford to raise that amount of money. And in both Camden and Rockport, the numbers spit out and they say you can afford to raise it because your valuation says you can raise more than we're asking you to raise, so we're not giving you any extra money. So at the end of the day, when these 2 things flesh out, Rockport's increase is larger because Rockport's valuation ended up increasing more than Camden's did. Even though Camden's is higher, the relative, it's all, how did it change compared to how did the other town change?
Thank you.
Yep. The way that this all fleshes out is to somebody's homeowner value and the impact on actual taxes. The tax impact per $100,000 of home value in Camden is $6.09, so a pretty modest increase. And for the average home in Camden, that comes out to $40.27. Rockport's tax impact per 100,000 is $12.66, or to the average home value, $74.22. And again, this is part of what Camden taxpayers pay for their school system. They're also paying for the 5-town CSD. Other budget information. The level of our unassigned fund balance. All of these things are projections. We don't have our FY25 audit back, so we don't have definitive numbers on these. but this is the best that we can project based on past numbers that we do have and things that we've tracked ourselves. So at the end of FY25, again, we don't know this for certain, but we believe our unassigned fund balance will have been about $2.2 million. If that's true, at the end of this year, we're predicting that our fund balance will be $2.7 million, which is a good fund balance, unassigned fund balance. In fact, we're predicting at the end of this year it's going to be so good that we want to move, and I have it in a later slide, $850,000 from the unassigned fund balance over to the capital reserve, because the capital reserve is a little bit low, and even doing that, we'll still be in a good spot with our unassigned fund balance. So we're projecting at the end of this year, our capital reserve will be down to $344,000. The reason why it goes up is because we're adding $850,000 from the unassigned fund balance to it, and we're spending a little bit of the money. Again, later slides will show that. But at the end of the day, we expect our unassigned fund balance to be over $2 million and our capital reserve to be just over $1 million. If that is where those two things sit, that's a really healthy place financially for the district to be in both of those funds. So one of our warrant articles will be about the capital reserve, and this is a warrant article that would say, shall the school board be authorized to transfer up to $850,000, that's what I just talked about, from the unexpended fund balance to the capital reserve, and be authorized to expend up to $150,000 from that reserve for the items set forth below and anything else that is unexpected or emergency that might occur. And the only thing we're planning to spend next year out of the capital reserve is half of that exterior door replacement at the middle school, at the elementary school. We also have a warrant article for the special ed reserve. We have $50,000 in a special ed reserve account. This just allows us to spend it if we need to. We've never spent it. It's sat there probably for 3 or 4 years at this point, but we always have this warrant article just in case we need to spend it for unexpected private placements. We also always have this warrant article, and this just allows us to spend grants and other money that we might get during the year, federal, state grants. This is the school nutrition article, and this is to see if we will appropriate $75,300 for the school nutrition program. This is what the district subsidizes our school nutrition program. It's a decrease of about $35,000 to $40,000 over this year, what we felt we needed. We always have this article that allows us to transfer amounts exceeding 5% of the total appropriation from one cost center to another if it's needed for next year. And that concludes my presentation. Are there additional questions?
Yes. The food service supplement, the food program supplement you just referred to, why is that not in the budget or reflected in the budget? Why is that a separate warrant article?
Because it doesn't hit this budget. It's like the way the state does it. It's a separate warrant article for the food service budget.
Okay.
Maria, in terms of the cuts and additions to positions, it feels to me like several of the people in the positions that are being cut could apply for several of the positions that are being created in pre-K, right? Like ed tech wise, you don't need a special certification to be a pre-K ed tech, or do you?
No, I don't think for ed tech you do.
Okay.
Correct.
And then, just in terms of the cuts around the behavioral ed tech at the middle school, I believe, is that driven by us seeing fewer behavioral incidents. Can you just talk a little bit about, or maybe Jay can, about the need around handling
Yeah.
behavior incidents?
I'm going to ask Jamie to actually first speak to that, and maybe Jake can kind of add in, because this position was created a few years ago
Yeah.
when Jamie was principal, and she can probably kind of speak to the origin of that and the need for that, and Jake can chime in.
So back probably the year we returned without masks after COVID, we had a significant rise in behavior issues, and we came to the board with a lot of data to add actually a behavior specialist, which is what we were trying to hire. We couldn't find anybody to fill that position because it did not fit within the main retirement system. So everybody we were interviewing declined the role. They were mostly social worker certified type people, and they were amazing, but we couldn't make it work. So we pivoted and kind of reallocated some of the bigger supports to our school counselors and social workers and assistant principal, and we went with kind of like an MTSS model for behavior, where the ed tech was reporting to the assistant principal, so they could be kind of like deployed out for all kinds of different things. So they might be assigned to classrooms where there were, you know, a significant number of students with behavioral support needs. They might be monitoring an in-school suspension situation. They might be helping provide a modified day for a student that was in referral process. So that over the tenure of, I would say up until last, and Jake should speak about this year, we had a significant decline with 3 consistent years of behavioral expectations. Nicole Seeger coming as assistant principal and tightening up our expectations to the point where our referrals to the office were significantly low to no. So there's a lot of capacity in having one social worker is very much full-time designated as special ed. There's a second school counselor, social worker, Jennifer Steck and Tanya Young, who offer a lot of support. But I think Jake should probably speak to this year and how, you know, shifts in leadership change, shifts in behavior sometimes. So I think that's probably not as peaceful sailing, just to be honest, but I think they're on the upswing with that, so.
I guess a couple of high-level comments first. One is that I don't want to cut anybody. I mean, nobody's sitting around twiddling their thumbs, and everybody's valuable. And this, you know, where we ended up targeting our cuts to be reasonable about fiscal responsibility was a group decision. Secondly, I'd say that in terms of behavior, just coming from Portland, what counts as a problematic behavior here would probably not count as problematic behavior in Portland. I think that we saw actually an uptick in our building with leadership transition of me coming in and learning the system in terms of behavior. That seems to be rounding a corner right now. We have awesome people, and I think that we can make things work and continue to be an excellent school academically and behaviorally and culturally with the proposed staffing adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
While you're here, I had a similar question to Marcus's, and maybe this is all wrapped up in that same response, but just thinking about the MTSS reduction from 2 to 1, I can't remember whether that was exclusively at the middle school. No.
Yes,
Okay.
That's sharing the MTSS coordinator between the 2 buildings.
Okay.
So that person doesn't deliver direct services to students at the middle school. They coordinate and supervise. They have at times offered small group intervention. The elementary school, that person's been a little more hands-on with students. And I think that's something we have to figure out with the elementary program, where they've staffed with a person. The coordinator role is pretty common in districts to be shared across multiple schools to run the MTSS process with like data analysis and intervention supervision, you know, student groups, the reporting structures, those kind of things. Little will change at the middle school. The bigger impact will be felt at the elementary school, I think, with the shift.
And are there student needs that will be under-met as a result of collectively these reductions, particularly like this special education ed techs, the MTSS coordinator at the elementary school? And I know you're going to say no, but I really kind of want to understand, like, what will be the impact of these reductions, which makes sense on paper, on kind of like the educators and students in the building, particularly maybe those who have the most need and are maybe at the margins, and like is, you know, kind of a equity question maybe.
Sure. Okay, so a few thoughts. One, go
Can I
ahead,
just say
Maria.
something?
Yeah.
I would say you'd be hard-pressed to find a school whose students with the most needs have more supports than they do in our school system. So I actually don't think your question is about students with the most needs, to be quite honest with you, because our kids with the most needs have one-on-one support with them.
Sure.
And
sure.
we're not talking about touching anything.
Right, the IEP mandated, right, I understand that.
And we got
yeah.
caseloads of 4 to 6 kids in some of those, with some of those teachers. So I think your question might be more kids on a margin that's less than the most needs.
Sure. No, that's a fair clarification. That's a fair clarification.
Yeah, I think that's fair framing. You know, frankly, it would have been awesome to have done this the next fiscal year after I graduate my largest and neediest class of students, where some of the supports that are being cut are actually the supports that are keeping that cohort in good shape. Yeah, so I think that the reduction of one special educator, one special ed tech, we're going to feel that in terms of the team structure, because right now it's very tidy. Each team, you know, we're really built around teams, and each grade level team has a special educator and a tech who's dedicated to them, and is super integrated into everything. So we'll have a little bit less of that. I know some staff are worried about what that might mean for our project-based learning curriculum. I'm optimistic about that, more optimistic than some staff, I think, at the moment. I think that the shared MTSS coordination is going to have limited direct impact on students on that margin. I think it's more of a structural thing, like trying to figure out how to make the back-end systems efficient and sustainable.
I have a couple of questions about the resource room staffing reductions. It looks like there's at least 2 positions that are specific to that, or at least if I'm reading your slide right. Eliminating, and this is at the middle school, eliminating 1 resource room teacher and eliminating 1 resource room ed tech.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that you noted that the caseload is going to reduce from 15 to 11.
No. The caseload.
Other way around, sorry.
Yeah, if we didn't reduce any teachers, their caseloads would be 11.
Okay.
Reducing by 1 will result in caseloads of 15.
Okay, understood. Thank you. So, in terms of just functional rejection, I guess, how would you anticipate those 2 cuts are going to impact the way resource room services are delivered?
Yeah, Jess should probably answer that question.
I would say at this point, when faced with this model, Jake and Nicole and I have actually met with our team leader to talk about models that we could utilize at the middle school going forward with 3 teachers and 3 ed techs. We've identified a model that will allow us to, you know, first of all, fulfill IEPs first and foremost, but also provide a high degree of services across grade levels in a slightly different way. So we're able to maintain most co-taught instruction. We're able to maintain coverage in most classes, depending on grade level, and we're able to maintain most of the the infrastructure that we're used to with a few changes. So we are looking at a model in which we designate a special ed teacher for 5th grade, have a shared 6th and 7th grade teacher and a designated teacher for 8th grade. And then we share ed techs according to student need across those classrooms. And, you know, we share some responsibilities as well. I share that model with you. It's still in development, but we are able to take the resources that we've been given to ensure that we're meeting the requirement of student IEPs and supporting as much inclusion as possible. So we are able to make it work, in short answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. And just perhaps trying to find an overly simplified answer, but how would, I see the case, or this per student, the ratio going up with respect to the teacher position, but how, is there any anxiety on the part of the folks who are in the room about being able to handle all the responsibilities in the resource room?
So I mean, I would say this is a big change, right, for the school, which is used to having one special ed teacher and one ed tech per grade level, you know, that, which has been certainly a bonus. And so it is definitely a point of change. In terms of responsibilities, I mean, I would say the stress, I would say, is more associated with maintaining the level of integration within the team and the level of co-taught instruction that they're currently used to, as opposed to being able to meet the special ed responsibilities. So a caseload of 15 is still extremely reasonable, and actually the state cap is 35, not 28, so it's still well below what the state says you should be able to handle, which is definitely too high. But they're able to maintain, you know, to meet all of those responsibilities. It's more the PBL piece and integration into the larger team structures that I think will be more of a challenge, besides kind of fulfillment of their special ed responsibilities, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you.
Can I add one more thing too? Part of the reason we moved to that model is we had bubbles that were pretty large. I think starting with like my oldest daughter's class was 22 or something. Graduation was a year or two. We had caseloads of 24. So we got to a place where we were able to have special ed teachers at the grade levels, but they also had caseloads that were significantly higher. We actually had an IEP coordinator for like a minute, and we had to get rid of that position because they had so many students to actually case manage. So even with the grade level specific designations, which we did in large part for co-teaching, so we weren't pulling kids out of the classroom, so they weren't missing those rich experiences, they still had huge caseloads and were servicing kids in the Excel rotation, so they weren't being pulled out, but they were managing a 24 student caseload in a grade level. And a lot of those bubbles are on their way through and out.
It's about just like different
cohorts of kids break, and they 24 very abundant,
right,
you know, humans who needed, it was a lot. So we actually ended up splitting a second case manager for that class. So there's been a lot of like shifting in response to student need with trying to hold on to grade level inclusion for the PBL work.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay.
Sarah, you have one.
Oh. Yeah, I'm curious about within some of these reductions, if it will, like, how it will result in academic programming changes. I think what I'm seeing is that the Spanish program, for example, would no longer be taught at the kindergarten level, but would continue to have the same programming for 1st through 4th at the elementary school. Is that correct?
I would say that it's, we can have the current level of programming at the 1 through 4 level.
Okay.
I think that, you know, I'm on my way out. I would encourage those at the elementary school to think about if it would be more effective to reallocate that programming in a way that might actually enhance language learning. It might be better, done slightly differently than it's been done in the past, but the capacity is there to do it the same as it's been done in the past at grades 1 through 4.
Okay, thank you. And can you talk a little bit about the gifted and talented shift as well? Do we expect any change in services of what we're currently able to offer? I mean, I know the gifted and talented program has, they work with kids who don't necessarily test into that program officially, but are able to, you know, expand what they're able to offer to other kids. And I'm just wondering how, if you anticipate that that program will look very different under this new model, or what would the changes be?
I mean, I'll take a stab at that, Jamie, and then you can maybe add something in. But we have to remember it's a 0.2 FTE reduction, which is not a lot. Another thing to keep in mind is that the program has expanded vastly beyond its intention. And the person who runs that program wrote a letter to the board and said that they service something like 36 or 38% of the student body, which is far beyond. Gifted and talented is 2 to 5% of the population. 38% is far beyond the intention of that program. So might there be some kids who currently are served that might not be served by that program in the future? I would say that's probably likely, but I might argue that might actually be a preferred thing for the school. We don't want to track a lot of students at that grade level, certainly at the younger grade levels where we've expanded programming into younger grade levels, where we have documentation that you can find on our website that says we don't do programming at those grade levels. So right now the program looks really different than what we advertise the program to be. So I think this pulls it back closer to what our intentions have been for the program as well. Certainly there's far more capacity left with even 0.6 to meet the needs of the gifted and talented population, which is maybe 15 students at the school.
Officially tested into that program.
Yeah, and we have guidelines that are available on the website
Copies for people.
that talk a little bit about how that program might be expanded for kids who test at these levels, but it's expanded far beyond that at this point. So there is no concern that we're going to be able to very easily meet the needs of the gifted and talented population at the elementary school.
I'm gonna actually hand this to you guys because I think it's an important point of education. So we did a program review of gifted and talented a few years ago and revisited testing expectations and kind of like what the actual structures would look like. All the teachers in the K-12 that are involved in that were there. Chris and I were there participating with Deb McIntyre. This was the revised outcomes from that, which is, elements of this from the handbook that you approve, and then this is on the website. So Chris currently has 15 identified students. That's actually on the higher end of where they are often. It's usually around 8 or 10. And in many schools, the GT state recommendations like 1 to 720 population students, which would be like 1 for both of our schools. So we are generously staffed, which we appreciate, and when we have extra time, we do tend to expand and offer support services. So certainly when teachers come forward and say, I've got students that feel really exceptional, and like, how do I challenge them? That consult model is pretty common. And in this case, I think that's expanded beyond that to like pulling students out of classes, which is really giving Tier 3 service, which is really providing specialized education services for gifted students, and that's not how those students are identified. So when meeting with the teacher about what that would look like, we were, Katie, you can speak to this too if you want to join in or shift any of this. We looked at like the priority would be the gifted and talented identified students, and what would the structures look like where we have the least impact on their regular classroom instruction. So where are we pulling and instructing and expanding without just removing them from the designated area? How would we still positively consult and support students that are already getting some of those supports, so it's not a drop that and move along? So kind of a work itself out model with essentially like a 1-day reduction seems very reasonable to do. But the priority again would be anchoring it back in gifted and talented services for 15 students, which in a lot of models looks like enrichment, passion-based projects. I think Katie and my hope is long-term, it's like connected to the EL model, like what are the project expansions and extensions that can happen. That can be done in a model where GT students are prioritized and sometimes clustered together on purpose, so they have peer group, but also then those extensions are available to other students because they're working in unison with the teacher because it's all content that kids are exposed to. So there's a lot of ways to integrate some of those same approaches, but not depend on a other place, other curriculum, other work over time. Again, obviously, because the pilot is still happening for Yale, but I don't know if you want to add anything, Katie, or does that summarize our meeting with Sarah pretty well? Yep.
I would just add that there was a time when we called that program Horizons, and when they did this program study, one of the decisions, as you can see, was to not do that anymore. So it really went very specific to GT. And I think the other piece is that this district is very generous in terms of us hiring talented teachers to differentiate in the room.
Yep.
And so it's expanded because there was the space to do that.
Yep.
And it's kind of that playing back in there. And so I'm not worried. I mean, we're literally delivering what we're saying we should be delivering.
And still a little more, really. I mean, because part of what we talked about is if we were going back to 15 students, we could be going to like a 0.2, right? So we're not, and it's at a 0.6, which means there is space there to do some of the support for consult model for teachers. We talked about still there might be a specific student that's so exceptional at a younger age that's not identified in the age range of this, that we still want to accommodate and support the teacher and family with that child. And that's commonplace at the middle school as well, where they provide like family consults and they manage a GT plan earlier. And that happens, you know, every couple of years we get a student who's really well beyond their years and ready in KM1, and we have to respond to that, and we wouldn't change that.
Right, and that's
Okay, yeah.
And I would say that one of the things we've discovered this year, actually out of the other end of intervention, is our math interventionist is pushing in and said, I don't want to pull out as much. I really want to see what happens when I push in and teach together in there. And I think sometimes with changes, you can look at a different model, and it's been very successful for that individual to do that. And I can see that being a possibility with some of what we do with the GT program, and that Sarah could push in and again in that process be working with a broader range of students.
When you say push in, you mean she
Into
would
the classroom.
go into
Yeah.
the homeroom classroom or the whatever class is being taught, and maybe work with a select group of kids
Right.
within the classroom as opposed to pulling them out of the classroom.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good way.
It feels to me one important thread to kind of connect with our discussion from last year. You know, we heard a lot from parents around the elementary Spanish program that a real important component was the cultural piece and being immersed and exposed to that. And, you know, we're maintaining the same level of what kids are getting, you know, through this change, but actually I should say, and from what I've heard from Katie's presentations and in curriculum committee and through the EL program, it feels like we've also really bolstered kids' access and exposure to a lot of different cultural aspects throughout this year, you know, which had been there already, but listening to what we heard last year, you know, it feels like there's been a robust response to have it across the school and not just in this one content area. So not a question, but it felt like an important thread to bring in from what we heard last year.
So back to the changes that Katie just described. When would be the first year that the students who are taught under the model, she's just the newer model of G&T and reducing the number of non-G&T kids who were participating in that program, when's the first year we're expecting that those kids will be assessed in a way where we can actually try to quantify whether the change corresponds to either a increase or decrease in terms of score, you know, testing numbers?
Yeah, Rick, we test at the same time, no matter what the model is.
Yeah.
And that the criteria for who qualifies for GT is consistent. So those things wouldn't change. I don't know if the question that you're asking, like a lot of students that are being served don't qualify for GT.
And haven't had any testing or anything, yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm asking a different question.
You're asking
And-
if we made the change.
Yeah, in terms of, data on whether the reducing non-G&T kids' access to G&T programming in the elementary school, when is the first year that we're expecting we're going to see testing results, meaning assessment results, of those children so that we can compare to, let's say that, I don't know, let's just say that this year's third graders was one of the years when there was a larger population of kiddos getting involved in the G&T program, but the second graders are not. When would be the first year that we'll be able to, whether that's the correct year or not, when do we project that we'll be able to see objective testing data that would say, oh, actually, this really worked out well. We're not seeing a reduction in math scores, for example, or we are.
Greg, can I just try and address it for a second? I think there's two things that are happening here. One is our program should only be servicing third and fourth graders. That's what we say. And so it's expanded back down to lower grades. So the other part is when I shared that model just now, possibly doing a push-in piece, we're just in the exploratory stage of if this reduction is made, what could it possibly look like so that you could still have some benefit of the enrichment piece for other kids. But literally the way the program is stated, don't even need to do that. It is totally about delivering to third and fourth grade students who qualify for gifted and talented. And that's a very small population. And as Maria just said, the testing part of nothing has changed in sort of our protocol of how we identify those children. We've just it's been expanded that if you would like to try this opportunity, you could. And that's tricky because that has been an expansion that really it goes against what the summary was from just a couple years ago.
Rick, could you have Johnny's in third grade, he was part of this expanded bucket this year, his NUIA scores or whatever. Next year, Johnny's in fourth grade, he's no longer part of the larger catchment for gifted and talented. I guess you could try to correlate with those students and say, okay, did all these kids who kind of got kicked out of that enrichment, did their scores collectively lower? I mean, it'd be correlation. You couldn't necessarily tell whether that was why, but I guess maybe that's a data point you could look at.
The question was, when is the first year that the children who would be impacted by this change will be assessed in a way that we can actually...
Kids are assessed every year on NUIA tests in third and fourth grade.
Okay.
So that's, again, the assessment testing is a continual thing. But I think we're also doing a new ELA program that's supposed to be a lot better. We're doing a much better math program. How do we know if scores are because of a new ELO program or a gifted and talented program? It is really hard to pinpoint, or if a kid had a bad day on the day they took a test. It's really hard to actually correlate something like that to the data. There's certainly a lot of research out there that would say that pulling kids out of class in this age is not a positive academic thing for them, and that having kids be grouped in mixed classes with robust programming is the best thing for them academically. But it's hard.
I want to just say one more thing. I think that maybe the reason you might be asking that question too is thinking we're going from 15 to we're going from whatever the number was to 15. I feel like what we said is it's growing out those other supports for students. It's not just eliminating everything. I mean, part of what we talked about was your priority is the 15 students because they're identified and we need to service them because we have a state plan that says this is how we do it. We need to do that. And with the other time, where can we elevate, raise the floor for all kids, provide extensions and enrichments? And if you already have groups of students that are in accelerated math courses with Sarah, they're going to continue because it's already underway. We're not going to pull out and say, these 2 students weren't identified, you're a year advanced, but sorry, you're out. So there's a transition into that. Because again, I just want to say, like with 15 students, if we only serve those students, we'd be talking about like a 0.2 position. With a 0.6 position, you have an expanded opportunity to service or support teachers with acceleration or enrichment in the classroom. So you might still get there, but you're going to get there in a push-in collaborative model instead of a over here, different curriculum, different projects, completely other, which makes it very difficult to deliver the EL curriculum. And we're talking about 2-hour blocks of integrated ELA, science, and social studies. So ideally, those enrichments might even tie into those, even if there are new ideas or things that the GT teacher brings to the classroom or as opportunities. They don't have to be exactly the same thing or pathway every other student's doing, but true enrichment consult could still provide opportunities for lots of students. It doesn't have to be tied to just those 15. So there's a balance of like, you're still supporting it right now and proposing a 0.6 position for 15 plus. And so that plus doesn't just stop. It's got to have a transition plan. That's part of what the meeting was with Katie and Sarah, was how to do that effectively so those kids aren't getting the rug pulled out from the supports they've had.
Okay. So we'll have numbers of some sort that would be, if this change were implemented now, presumably be just a year out. Those kids would be tested, so we would see the results the following year. Okay.
Yep.
I'm not arguing about yay or nay as to
You're
whether
just
we
it
should.
made a
I know you're anticipating that, but I want to see. I'd rather see data.
I wasn't
before
actually.
have
I was just trying to explain the idea that I think there might be thoughts that like you were removing a lot of things. I don't think that's actually happening once we got in and looked at what's possible with that schedule. And the testing data since implementing Bridges is phenomenal. Like really valid curriculum sequentially across grade levels has made a huge difference. They're in the solid 80s, and so I would expect if that fell backwards, then we need to look at a lot of things. So yeah.
I have a question, and maybe you can help me understand. So about 10 years ago, I remember there was a change in the gifted and talented program at Crest. It was either dissolved or something had happened. I mean, it affected our family directly, like we moved schools. So what happens with this program that there's an arc of like, it's there, then it expands, then we're decreasing? Like, I guess I just kind of want to understand why this happens with this specific program overall. Like, it seems over this last 10 years there has been it was there, then it was dissolved, or that might not be the right word, but something happened and then now it's grown again. So like, what are the parameters in which it operates? Why does this happen?
I feel the least equipped to answer that question because I've been in this position for about 5 months. But so I can't. I think Katie and Chris might be able to. Chris.
It is a state mandate that we have a
And
program.
we have a plan, Licia, that we have to, we write, and I would say, I think when you hire great people and expand things, and we have people that do not sit still, they fill their schedules, it could have been that it expanded. I can't speak specifically to Crest, but the state plan is to service the students.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I'm not arguing that. I
I
absolutely
know.
think that there
I
should
wish I
be
could
this.
tell you what happened. Yeah,
I just
I don't
think
know.
there's a confusion around whatever happened 10 years ago. I feel like we're sort of in a similar space of do you remember, Rick? Because it was like Hollis and Baxter and all of those kids, something happened where there was a change. So I don't remember what it exactly was.
I think there was an individual in the position who took a different position, and I think it changed after she left.
Okay,
But
that might
that's
have been that.
me shooting from the hip, so.
Okay.
Because I do
shouldn't
know
say
you had
it.
a very long span of the same person, and it was very much more project-based and student individual. You can step to this too. They designed their own projects and pursued that. Then then there was somebody, and then I came in for a stretch, and it's very much the similar model here, and then we've had this piece, but it was Horizons then.
Okay.
So that was allowed, that you had some expansions. I did math, science, and literacy.
Okay.
But again, the focus was 3-4, always has been 3-4.
Got it.
With consultation to younger grades. And as Jamie has said, is when, for instance, I had an accelerated math class, so I had math every day with a group that were just off the charts. That changes your schedule. If you don't have that, then you have more capacity to expand into some of those other spaces. And I think all we're seeing, there's no criticism here of Sarah. It is just that she's taken and offered these pieces, and then if I'm a homeroom teacher and somebody comes to me and says, hey, I've got this space, would you like to give me some kits? I'm going to be like, for sure. I don't believe folks doing that either. It's very hard to differentiate for everybody in your class. I think we can do it. Just to do it all the time is exhausting.
Yeah.
So that's where we're like, oh, okay, we need to kind of regroup here. And so that's why the position got looked at again as a possibility. And I think Sarah came as a 3-day position to begin with.
That's right. The other, I think what you're referring to, we had a longtime teacher leave, and then we hired a replacement who quit 1 week into the school year.
Oh, that's right.
And left,
That might have been it. That might have been it.
That's what I was, so more
I remember
delicately
now.
saying.
Yeah.
You would have felt that impact.
Yeah.
No question. And then,
Yeah.
And then, we used some Band-Aid
Got it.
approaches, and then Katie came along.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear, like, for somebody who is familiar with children who are on that periphery,
Right.
where they're just under the, 97 percentile or whatever, they and absolutely do belong in that extra. I mean, I'm all for it. I just was trying to understand, like, I just don't, this position, I would love it to be what it needs to be, but I just was trying to understand the arc of it over the last decade. So, thank you.
Maria, can you just explain quickly why it's important that we have a robust unexpended fund balance and capital reserve?
Sure. The fund balance just gives the district financial security, and to outside entities who evaluate us when we go to take out loans, they look at our fund balance and its size to determine what our interest rates might be, because they base it on our financial health. So if we have a really low fund balance, we're likely to get a higher interest rate when we take out loans than if we have a healthy fund balance. We will get a more favorable interest rate in loan terms, saving the district millions of dollars over time. So that's one thing in terms of the fund balance. The capital reserve is important for us to have a healthy amount of money in there, because it helps buffer future school budgets from high needs. It's very difficult for a school budget, like if, the old portion of the elementary school, the Montessori wing, needed a roof replacement that cost $2 million. It's really hard to add $2 million to our budget one year in the ops and maintenance line, because all of a sudden, our taxpayer increase that year would be 18% or something. Like, you can't absorb that kind of money. So the fund balance helps us buffer from what is typically high expenses, maintaining our facilities and our buildings. So it allows us to use the capital reserve instead of tapping into that year's local budget. Granted, all the money still comes from taxpayers, but this just allows us to buffer wide swings, mostly increases, in our taxes. And the wildest and widest swings in our budget generally come in ops and maintenance, because it's all of a sudden we'll have a multi-million-dollar cost or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's really difficult to have an increase of $200,000 to that cost center in a year. Has a huge impact on our budget. So that helps buffer and moderate the rest of the budget for us. So those two things, particularly in combination with each other, just means that the district's in a really financially healthy place, able to weather some storms that might come our way.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion? All right, moving on. We'll hear an update at the next meeting. Just, is there any public comment on the budget before we move on? Just wanted to open it up. Okay, not seeing anyone jumping out of seats. Again, as we've said to parents and others, always you can write to the board and we will respond to you. I will respond to you. It's actually a lot of fun for me, so I actually enjoy that somewhat more than public comment where I can't respond to you.
I'm sorry, Bree, I have a question about, sorry,
No, go
I should
ahead.
know this already. When the board receives emails or the board receives a letter, for example, from a taxpayer or a person served by the community, what happens with those comments? Do they ever see them added to minutes? But
the whole board receives them via email, and then I, as board chair, respond to those. So like teachers have written to us recently, I've responded thanking them for sharing their perspectives, things like that. I know we had one today from a parent, so I will be responding to that to, actually somebody I know, so personally I said, I hope you'll listen tonight and hear, and then we could, maybe have more of a discussion, but that is the process right now.
But there's no repository that the public can access?
Except for our email, and if someone wanted to FOA those, of course they could.
Thank you.
Item 9, board chairs report. I just wanted to note that Dr. Neal is coming to visit the end of March, so March 30th to April 2nd. We have a number of events we're working on planning, including an event with the CRSA on Monday evening, a dinner with the board, hopefully. I think we have enough people now to say that that is a go. And a parent meet and greet Tuesday evening, and then community events for the whole community at the Villager Cafe, which I believe will be Wednesday evening and Thursday morning.
Tentatively.
So that's my report. Superintendent's report.
I had a report in the packet, and I have nothing else to add. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Any questions? All right, seeing none. Administrative reports. Jamie Stone.
I have a report in the packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of good things going on. That's what I'll say. A lot of good work.
Jamie, on the educational framework, does the framework connect the two districts in any way?
Yes, the idea would be that the framework would be some of the tenets and pillars that we would hope to kind of protect and inculcate. So as we move to different strategic plans, there's an opportunity to hold on to those as anchors across the districts, pre-K to 12. Yes, so all administrators, we wouldn't be looking at necessarily separate. We could, I guess, but at this point we were envisioning it as one.
No, I think that's an
as
important
one
thing.
to help us with exactly that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sarah.
Yeah, just a question about under your pre-K updates. You said you're planning to finalize an update to the pre-K curriculum framework. I was just curious what those look like, or if you can share anything about that yet.
Sorry, Heather, I saw you. You're here, so you might have to come speak. Heather and I were looking at the main standards around pre-K and mapping the alignment between those and the outdoor education program that are in existence at the pre-K and seeing where there's alignment. So Heather's going to take some time away from the classroom to kind of build those out so we can just share that we have good alignment. So when we expand to a second classroom, we can duplicate as much as we can because of so much of what has been embedded in the outdoor program came with Heather. And so we want to make sure it's well documented and easily shared so we have consistency across the classrooms. And then we can also, if we end up expanding to the partnership, have the other pre-K partner be able to look at those with us and feel like we're equitably servicing kids across all those spots. Yeah. So we're hoping April, I think, is when we're going to bring it to the curriculum committee meeting, and have a first look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to add anything, Heather? Is that good? Okay.
Rick?
Jamie, under your first paragraph about professional learning, I've read this a couple of times, and I'm still trying to figure out what you're... so you said topics, this is about the distraction and AI. Topics included workflow efficiencies. You said you've been working to determine which tools we have privacy agreements with to be able to utilize. What are we talking about there?
Well, I never got to ask Colin to talk, because he's behind the camera, but I will
name out.
try my best. In order for us to actually utilize some of the AI tools, they have to have appropriately signed privacy agreements to protect our data, our student data, our teacher data, the school data. And some of these tools on the workflow end were for adults in work efficiencies, for administrators and teachers, and some were for working directly with students. So in this workshop, there were like 2 lanes that we were looking at. But before we ever click, yes, we can do those, Colin has to say they are officially vetted and have a signed privacy agreement. And did I do okay? I did okay. That's excellent. So if Colin says they do not, I cannot utilize those tools. So we've been through a couple, and then I have a couple more to share to see if we can use those in practice.
So it's about protection of data.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
All right, Jess, I think you're up.
You have my report in your packets. Just a couple things I wanted to point out. First, I just wanted to clarify in terms of the numbers of McKinney-Vento students. You'll notice the numbers are fairly low, both at the elementary school and the middle school. That's actually a count of kids who are classified under McKinney-Vento who are attending our schools. We also share transportation responsibilities for children who may live here and attend school, originate in a different district. So Maggie actually has those numbers, but those numbers are actually a lot higher. So we transport kids maybe from Rockport to someplace in RSU 13 or from Camden to someplace in RSU 40. So that kind of adds to the complexity of the transportation picture. I know you asked that question about budget earlier, so that could maybe help. I just wanted to add that detail. Other things are pretty straightforward. I just also wanted to note we're really on pace for referrals at this point. Like children who are considering for eligibility within special education. And then we're really gearing up now. It sounds odd to say this, like at the end of February, beginning of March, but for transitions for kids for next year. So we're already thinking about incoming children and then children who are, switching schools within our district. And our team does a really great job of not only maintaining high levels of service with the kids they're working with now, but also conducting observations, gathering information, and then participating in meetings to ensure that both families and kids and new teams are ready to receive kids in the fall. So we're actually adding, I don't think I put it in here, but we're actually adding a group to this list for this year. We'll be having transition meetings for kids who will be joining our 4-year-old program as well. So that's something I'm currently wrapping my brain around. But we're really excited to do that work and then facilitate those transitions later on. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Jess, the number of multilingual learners is that higher than normal?
Yes,
12
we have a healthy
Crest seems a lot.
population. Yeah, it does keep expanding, and it's a higher number than we've seen in some time. So Corinne is balancing the needs of the children at the middle school and at Crest at this time, but it's definitely a full-time job with those numbers.
Is it a mix of languages that are their native language? Or?
Definitely.
Okay.
They range, from kind of more typical Spanish to Thai to lots of different languages, and we're actually just I think wrapping up access testing to kind of identify levels for those children, which help us inform goals and services. So it's a really robust system, and I feel actually really good about where we stand now in terms of our services to multilingual learners and our implementation of our LAU plan as compared to when we started our new model, because we had a lot of foundational work to do to establish a structure, and it's a good thing we did that given the numbers that we're seeing right now.
Okay. Good to hear. Thank you.
Sure thing.
All right. Jake Geisman. You here? You step out. Oh, you moved on me. It's not allowed, Jake.
Keeping you on your toes. Yeah, I have a very short report. I have a longer one already drafted for next month, but if there's any questions about this one, please let me know.
Is it in the packet?
Is it?
I think
I
don't see it, yeah.
Well, that's a great question. I don't know. I can tell you what it says.
That'd be great, because it's not in our packet.
Okay. I list 3 unfinished commitments to the strategic plan implementation for the building. I invite you to see the Poetry Cafes at 5:30 or 7 o'clock tomorrow at the middle school in Bisbee. And I gave an enrollment update where the class sizes varied a little bit, but we're still at 340 students, which is what we were at January 10th.
Thank you. Katie.
I went a totally different direction because I decided there was no new news on the strategic plan piece. We're just ongoing, so I gave you a glimpse of the days at Crest, which have been pretty exciting. One of the pieces I just want to mention is this last staff meeting where we started to look at traditions and really trying to identify what were the ones, well, it was a combination of what did people identify as traditions, what are ones that we felt we should keep, what are ones that maybe we used to have. Okay.
Colin's here too.
Thank you, Colin.
There's Colin.
I know. What are traditions that maybe we used to have and we'd like to bring back that we've gotten rid of? But to identify, my thing, we're about to come to a leadership meeting to say, where do you see Crest in 5 years? What do you want it to be? What does it look like? What is our niche? And just explore that as a staff. So we've got this list going now that we'll work with. And so a lot of what I profiled here are things that are traditions. There might be a whole school tradition, or they might be a grade level tradition. I think that's a really important piece for us to be thinking about. The other one I'm always going to keep coming back to this, is the number of interns that we're getting from the high school is just tremendous. And working hard on growing that program with Elaine, and that's been very, very exciting. Finally, I have a letter I'm going to read that if you didn't see it, it was in the Portland Press, and it thinks a little bit of Portland Press Herald about what it's like to be outdoors. It doesn't identify our school, but it is our school. And it's at a higher level. It's at a 3rd grade class. At 10:47 a.m., a teacher stood at her public school door checking her watch and her students as they headed out. The feels-like temperature was 3 degrees. She scanned the line of 3rd graders, hats low, neck warmers snug, mittens on, boots tucked. Every child was dressed for the weather. They headed into the woods. By 11:30 a.m., the students are still playing, building, laughing, exploring in powdery snow. The teacher checked in often. No one reported being cold. At 11:45, the group gathered for the hike back, pausing briefly to warm up before heading outside again for their regular 30-minute recess. So that particular grade level goes straight into recess. This was not reckless. It was thoughtful, supervised, and developmentally sound. In Maine, cold weather is often treated as a barrier rather than a condition children can safely adapt to. Many schools rely on rigid temperature cutoffs that keep students indoors for weeks. These policies are not only fear-based, they frequently reflect adult convenience over children's needs, despite strong evidence that year-round outdoor time supports physical health, emotional regulation, focus, and resilience. With proper clothing, active play, and attentive adults, cold exposure is safe. Children stay warm through movement and communicate discomfort when trusted. States like Alaska and Minnesota have with colder winters than Maine. I've been thinking of upper state Michigan with the chains on the buses. Successfully embrace outdoor learning. What is harmful is prolonged indoor confinement. Schools should revisit cold weather policies and replace fear and convenience with evidence-based practice. Maine children deserve to experience winter, not from behind a window, but fully within it. And, you know, what a lovely letter. Anne actually wrote it. I didn't realize it was there. And I just feel like the pieces that we're doing around the outdoor and being out in the wintertime. Today I was on duty, and the fourth graders were playing Capture the Flag. And by the end of the activity, and it was snowing hard, they had their coats off and their mittens off and their hat off. I don't even know how they were running the whole field, but I think that that is one of the pieces that defines us as a school, and I want to keep looking at that. So, Anne, thanks for sharing that, because I didn't realize it was there either.
And I just would say a follow-up to that letter, which Katie had shared, inspired what will be the center story in this year's SAD annual report. And it's going to be titled Embracing Winter. And that was an inspiration for like a great, center story about our school system being outside in the wintertime. And I asked Jake to send me a picture, which I put in a lot of the photos from this budget presentation will be in the annual report. And I wanted a picture of our Hardy middle schoolers who bike to school every single day all winter long. So the two kids that were biking in one of those pictures will be in it, and pictures of kids at the elementary school. So we've got some good stuff, but it's really actually is a pretty interesting piece that, as a district, we really embrace winter.
And when I meet with other people, for instance, the EL coach, and she says, "You're going outside in this?" We don't go outside when it's 30 degrees. And she just couldn't believe it. And as you mentioned those pictures, that is me on the sled, by the way, with all those fourth grade girls. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry.
Don't see any.
Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Standing committee reports. Joint curriculum, we'll have a March meeting, TBD. Finance met January 21st. Minutes attached, and it met today before the school board meeting. Becky, update.
Met at 6 o'clock. We discussed the fiscal year general fund year to date. The target's based on 16 of 26 payrolls through January 31st. The target is to have spent 61.5% of our budget, and the actual is 57.5, excluding debt and board contingency. Fiscal year 25, same period a year ago, we had spent 57.1% of our budget. After that, the administrators and directors offered information regarding their budgets. You saw the numbers in the presentation, but if I could add just a couple of things to it. One of the areas, the food budget, has slightly decreased, and just to know, our kids eat real food. It's made from scratch. There are no preservatives, it's not frozen, it's not reheated, and it's not processed, which really made me happy. And also we discussed the two buses, and as Marcus mentioned earlier, the reimbursement for that. So it was a good meeting.
Thank you, Becky. Joint finance meets March 23rd. Joint personnel meets March 25th. Joint policy will meet on March 9th, and joint facilities on March 16th. So lots of meetings ahead for all of us, so I hope you all have those on your calendar. If not, I'm sure Lewis can help you make sure they're there.
Just a quick note or question, and Jamie, 2 potential joint curriculum meetings in April and May, correct?
Yes, we have a pretty heavy lift in the review of the pilot. So one of the exercises we need to do is actually review the classroom books for EL. So we're gonna do the pre-K curriculum review, and we're gonna do some of the EL book review, and then we'll do the pilot review in May. We felt like we probably needed a little time in between both in case people needed more time to review the books.
Thank you. Finally, we have a list of future presentations. I think that list is pretty robust at this point, so I don't think we're going to be adding to it, especially as we continue to discuss the budget. And with that, we'll adjourn.